Hi, come on in. Go ahead and find some seats. It's so wonderful to have you all here. I see some familiar faces. I see a few new faces. Welcome to everyone. It's an exciting night. Many of you have read up on Rabbi Laibl Wolf. He is absolutely one of the top figures in Kabbalah today, teaching in countries and cities across the globe. And so exciting just for that reason. But having learned with him for some years now, I do believe he stands alone in terms of one thing, and that is finding tools to take really authentic Kabbalah and make it something that we can apply to our lives and very quickly and easily change counterproductive patterns, whether it's emotions or relational aspects. And I haven't seen anyone that takes Jewish mysticism and presents it in such a way that you and I can take it and use it in our lives the very next day or the very next week. So I'm so excited that he's here to share that with us. And if you find this interesting, we do have two other courses that are using some of Laibl's materials. So if anyone hasn't tried, User's Guide for the Soul is on Thursday mornings, not every Thursday, but most. And that's a beautiful text that goes very deeply into a technique that allows one to flow as a soul through a body much more masterfully. So it's been going for a while, but we'll do a little catch-up for any new faces that are most welcome to join us. And also, the end of November through December and January, we'll do a 5-week Intro to Kabbalah course that builds using Laibl's book, Practical Kabbalah, and just sit and talk and discuss his approach to how the Sefirot can be applied in our lives. So I welcome you to please sign up for the classes. There's forms and there's flyers back there, and we'd love to see some of you there. And one last piece, a lot of people show up with pads and want to take notes, and I understand. I'm the same way. I want to write down everything and capture it. But rest assured, we have video running, so this will be posted online. So if you'd like to sit back and relax and take it in, you can always revisit online any section where you want to write down terminology, etc. And speaking from experience, Laibl speaks on many levels at the same time, so there may be an advantage to putting the pen down and just watching and being here with us. So please welcome my teacher, Rabbi Laibl Wolf.
Thank you so much, Michael. It's a great pleasure to be here with you. Lovely to have seen your family again. And so wonderful to be here with your congregation. Usually when I'm introduced, everyone is told, please turn off your cell phones. And I get up and I tell everybody, please turn them back on. And people are somewhat puzzled, why do I want your cell phones on? And the answer should be obvious. You've spent an inordinate amount of time choosing your jingle, did you not? And therefore, when it sounds, it lets me know a lot about you. And then when those people around you get very angry because you didn't turn it off, it tells me all about them. So I start to get a sense of who my audience is. So please feel free to leave it on. I'm not sure why such an enlightened audience has come here this evening. But it must be that you know a lot of angry people, because surely it doesn't apply to you. So I'm going to share, and that way you'll be able to become a teacher to the many others in the world. Before I do, let me just make the obvious clear, and that is, we're living at a point in history which is unique in a number of significant ways. I've been told that in my lifetime, and possibly therefore yours, we have witnessed more change in the world than the cumulative history of humankind. That's quite amazing. For thousands of years, we lived in an agriculturally based society. Life didn't change much. Our habitats didn't change much. The ways that we operated during the day didn't change much. Our communication systems were highly limited. We were forced to enter into any encounter and try to make it very valuable because communication was so limited. We met possibly 200 people in a lifetime. Today you meet that in 10 minutes on any city corner. But I suppose that the singular factor that has really altered our state of being is the fact that we are no longer able to be ourselves. We're a product of so many forces and influences that compete for our mind and our heart. Certainly, the media is not a beneficent educational institution. You and I know it's a commercially exploitative mechanism whose singular goal is to ensure that we are in a state of fear, because they know full well the psychology of fear, that when we're afraid, we'll be glued to the screen, ratings will go up, and commerce for them will be improved. And the kind of fear-laden messages creating those insecurities are significantly unsettling our stability and our equilibrium. And our insecurities play out in all sorts of unpleasant manners. And we'll discuss some of these this evening. But I am an optimist by nature. I think in my reading of history, as you might have, humanity has always turned away from the edge and come good, no matter how much pain has ensued in the interim. And I think we'll be able to overcome and recognize how to become who we are. Every single person in this room is a unique, reincarnated soul brought into the here and now because you have individually something to offer that no one else in the world can. Each one of you is extremely special. There's never been a second of you and never will be. Your soul has always existed. But in previous lifetimes and in future lifetimes, you're given different bodies, different genes, different parents, different culture that you find yourself in, and therefore your persona becomes different. But you are the same person within. But the point I want to make is that if you don't offer your unique gifts to the world, we're missing out. It's like a Sefer Torah. You know full well if one letter is missing in a Sefer Torah, it renders all of it pasul, invalid. So I want you to be able to leave this evening adopting a leadership posture. To leave here prepared to influence the world. The butterfly effect, the multiplier effect. What you can do, no one else can. So that's by way of preface. In terms of the subject matter, the word Kabbalah was introduced. So let me be a little bit provocative. I think the study of Kabbalah is a complete waste of time. Good night. I'll tell you what I mean. written in Aramaic, cryptic, not understandable, with its own internal institution of interpretation. It makes for a very, very difficult text for today's person to enter into and think they can understand. And I think it's a real waste of time to do that. Yet, it contains a lot of wisdom, a lot of Torah wisdom. And therefore, to decipher it, we should access the explanations which were fortunately brought into being with the rise of the Baal Shem Tov and Hasidism in the 18th century, soon after the beginnings of the scientific method, soon after the Industrial Revolution, soon after the beginnings of nationalism, soon after the world changed. At that point, we needed to access deeper Judaism, deeper knowledge, in order to be able to maintain, as I said earlier, our equilibrium. Therefore, I do advocate its study, but in a manner which is understandable. So what I'm going to be sharing tonight is through the prism of Hasidus, explaining Kabbalah, making it accessible. And one more little caveat. To study something academically can be tantalizing, even exciting. But unless it becomes practical to our everyday life, unless it changes the way we behave, the way we speak, and the way we think, then it's not really worth what it's meant to be. So we generally, in our own personal lives, for example, on a Shabbos morning, we would sit down before davening and study a piece of profound text and then extract a concept that we may have learned and then meditate on it through a methodology known as hisbonenus or hisbonenut. And that process of meditation means to internalize it so that once we get up and finish the davening, we have changed somewhat. My master and teacher, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, always coined the phrase shinui hateva, which means to change your nature. That goes further than changing behavior. It means to change the origins of the behavior. And tonight's topic will become a vehicle to demonstrate how something like that is possible. So, those of you who now realize you've come to absolutely the wrong lecture, it's a good time to get up and go. Otherwise, you're stuck here for the duration. Can I also invite any questions throughout, rather than to leave them at the end? And if I make any mistakes, please correct me. And that way we'll have a nice Socratic dialogue rather than a monologue, because I have heard myself before. Now, I know that some of you will be looking to my left and others to the right, and that's okay, I won't take offense. But anything that comes on screen, I'm going to speak about, so don't be concerned. So let me ask you, to get you talking, what does anger look like? Do you want to throw out any words that you associate with angry people? What does it look like? Red. Excellent. Again? Alarming. Loud. Rage. Out of control. Impulsive. Threatening. Aggressive. So isn't it interesting? I think that every term that's been suggested is negative. And yet when I will say shortly the following piece of instruction from the Code of Jewish Law, the Shulchan Aruch, which is, we are not allowed to express anger under any circumstances whatsoever, without exception, period. Everyone gets angry with me. Suddenly, everyone tells me about the virtues of anger, and how dare I deprive you of your democratic right to express your anger. And yet, note, in all the terminologies that you have utilized, none of you extolled the virtue of anger. So please make a mental note of that later on when we get into debate stage. I've also come up with some things that you've mentioned. Loud, threatening, accusative, disempowering, overpowering, ugly, distorted, unbalanced, loony, selfish. And you can come up with many, many more, I've no doubt. Okay, so now let's go one step further. When do people become angry? Help me out. When do people become angry? Tell me some situations. When their needs and expectations or expectations are not met. Good. When they are. When they feel threatened. Frustrated. When they don't get their way. When they're not listening to you. And I'm sure there are others. Sorry? When they're hurt? Yep. Fine, absolutely. Okay, I've come up with some also, and I concur with the ones that you've said. People are provoked, dismissed, not recognized, blocked, deprived, deflated, not obeyed, conflicted, cheated, put down. What's the common denominator? Behind all the things that you've said and that I've come up with, can you come up with a common denominator? Fear, excellent. Ego, very, very good. Okay, you defer to him. Self-esteem, but that's also true. Hurt, very true. Yeah, there is a common denominator. And everything you've said is implicit in that common denominator. The ego is challenged. Now, I'm using the word ego in a specific way. I'm not using the word ego in a Freudian sense. I'm talking about the simplistic sense of ego, self-centeredness or self-orientation. When I, in some shape or form, am afraid emotionally, sometimes physically, God forbid. Now, if you are yelled at or screamed at, how do you respond? Well, not you, because you're an enlightened audience, as I said, but out there in the world, when people are yelled at and screamed at, how do they respond? They respond like monkeys. They copy the other one. Oh, there's my cue line. They're yelling at me. Right, now I'll just yell back. And of course, that way madness lies. Nothing gets solved by yelling back. But why do they yell back? Because in that moment, when they are being yelled at, put down, they have a moment where they doubt themselves. A moment of insecurity. And therefore, to compensate, I'll make loud noises, I'll stretch my vocal cords, I'll adopt an aggressive stance, because that way I can prove to myself I am something. But inevitably, all instances where you do behave that way and yell back, the result is because you have low self-esteem and your self-worth hasn't come up to par. So how might we handle more masterfully people abusing us? I'm distinguishing physical abuse, putting that completely aside. All other forms of abuse, verbal, emotional, etc. How might we respond in a more masterful fashion? Disengage is good, because disengage means I'm not quite sure that I trust myself, and best therefore to say nothing and go away. That's good, but that's not Jewish. I actually meant that in the best possible way to say that there is a better response. You shift. You shift your flow of consciousness so that rather than you be self-centered, you become other-centered. For example, they're yelling and screaming at me. That means they're in pain. People don't yell and scream unless there's emotional pain or physical pain. What can I do to assist them? And you may not be able to assist them. In fact, most times you can't, but that's not the point. The point is the self-talk. You're shifting from self-centeredness to other-centeredness. You're moving to empathy. You're moving to compassion. That's called reframing. There are other words for that, but let's stick with the word reframing, which I'll explain a little bit later on. When we are angry, we're full of ourselves. We call that in Hasidic terminology, yeshus. It's a colloquialism from the Hebrew word yesh. If anyone has ever called you, you're a big yesh, that's not a compliment. Okay? And the subject of that is called yeshus, not real words. But it means that you're full of yourself. Anger means we are full of ourselves. Let me give you, maybe I'll have it on screen next. What is anger? A working definition of anger. Let me share it with you. Anger is an attempt to control and dominate the other or the environment in order to alleviate one's own concerns, to alleviate one's own fears and insecurities. Anger is always an attempt to help oneself at the expense of the other. It's exploitative. It's using the other one for your own purposes. Okay? Have a think about that and tell me how you agree or disagree. Or find exceptions to the rule. Anger is never justified, ever, as I alluded to earlier. Notice that provokes some of you. Surely there are circumstances where anger can be rationalized and defended. Come on, we've got an audience of some 150 people. Come on, let's have a defense attorney here. Even for the sake of the argument, two Jews, let's have an argument. Pinchas, that's good. Put Pinchas aside, that's excellent. Pinchas was an individual in the Torah seeing something horrible taking place in the camp of Israel. He picks up a sword, a spear, and he spears the people who offend Jewish law. Okay? You can come up with a better example than Pinchas, surely. Moshe Rabbeinu hits the rock. Definitely a good example. You can come up with a better one than that. Absolutely, God. Every Montic and Donistic, Monday and Thursday, God gets angry with the Jewish people. All right? And here you are, Laibl, trying to pull the wool over our eyes and say, but we're not allowed to get angry, but God, that's okay. Good argument, good point, don't you think? So let me explain. Firstly, philosophically, if God is infinite and God is all good, it's impossible by definition that God has a deficiency. And if anger is forbidden, God can't get angry. But that doesn't help us because it appears he does. She does. It does. Did you know that in Hebrew, and I know there's Hebrew-speaking people here, there's about 6 or 7 words that all get translated in English in the one word, anger. Words like ka'as, za'am, karon af, rogez, chamimut, chema, and onwards. How come they all get translated as anger? Answer, translation is wrong. In a moment, I'll show you how that translation is wrong. So I've said it's never justified. I want to give you a quote from Rambam, Maimonides. Some of you will know that Maimonides was the codifier par excellence on Judaism, took the whole Talmud and codified it into an encyclopedic manner. Have a look at the quote. Anger is an exceedingly bad passion, and one should avoid it to the last extreme. One should train oneself not to be angry, even for something that might justify anger. If he wishes to arouse fear in his children, he should make a show of anger, but in reality, his mind must be composed like someone who merely simulates it. The sages therefore charged that anger should be avoided to such a degree that one should train oneself to be unmoved even by things that would naturally provoke anger, and this is the good way. Coming back to God. When you look at Rambam here, Maimonides, he does give an implied permission. Find the operative phrase. You can make a show of anger, a pretense. And he writes, he implies here and spells it out elsewhere, that within you have to be absolutely pacific, absolutely balanced, and it's for the good of the other, not to serve yourself. That's hardly anger. The word that Rambam is talking about is the Hebrew word ka'as. Ka'as is that anger that you and I are talking about. I'm not going to analyze the other Hebrew words right now. That'll take us too far away. But trust me, ka'as is that word. Sir, you will never find the word ka'as vis-a-vis God even once in the whole Torah. God never gets angry. Consequences, of course. We apply consequences in society, in the home, and God does for the world. Sometimes the consequences appear extremely harsh, but not out of anger. If parents ever become angry with their children, they're carrying out a great disservice to their children. A child intuitively knows by the look on your face that when you are expressing anger, it's all about your need, your frustration, you getting it out, and he or she happens to be the object closest by to be beaten that way. Whenever you need to apply a consequence to a child, you must do it lovingly. That doesn't mean you don't do it sternly. It doesn't mean that you don't necessarily make the point clear and express your disappointment with the child. But the child's got to understand that you're doing it because you love the child, not because the child has roiled you, upset you, and it's all about you. Same with God. Never gets angry. Okay? Questions? Yes? We may have felt anger, but if so, that's wrong. I'll tell you. What was the most potent military force ever in Jewish history? And I'll tell you the answer was the army of David HaMelech, of King David. Every one of King David's soldiers was trained never to express anger in the heat of battle. Anger sows confusion. It stops you becoming strategic. A good coach will always tell his or her players, don't get angry on the field. You won't be able to perform your best. 3 of my sons served in the Israeli army. 2 of them served in a commando unit known as Duvduvan, and they were officers. My 3rd son was in tanks, Shirion, and he was a Katsin there. Each one of them trained his unit members never to get angry in battle. When calamities befall us, when horrible people do horrible things to us, we must feel strongly about that, and we have to be strategic. And later on, I'm going to quote a phrase from Sefer Tanya, which is the Alter Rebbe's magnum opus. And the phrase is, Moach shalit al halev, that the mind must provide the pathway for the emotions. Emotions possess no compass bearing. Emotions are fuel. Emotions are forceful. Mind, on the other hand, doesn't have any fuel, but mind has compass, direction. We call it wisdom. And later on, I'm going to be speaking about how you bring the wisdom of mind together with the force and energy of emotion and practice what is now called emotional intelligence. So I happened to be in the country when Pittsburgh happened. And of course, I was shocked, still am, that it can happen in this country. But on the other hand, I'm not going to get angry. Anger's not going to do anything but serve my purpose. I'm doing something, hopefully, that will, in my own Dalit Amas, as we call it, my own environment, is able to make the world a better place. But if I simply fret about that, then I'm just pleasing myself. Okay, a little segue, yes. No, only the English says that, and the English is always wrong. So, now that we've introduced a little bit about mind and emotion, which goes to the core of it, is anger an expression of mind or emotion? What do you think? Emotion. And we said before that emotion doesn't have a compass bearing. A parent loves a child, and the child says, give me, give me, give me. And the parent gives, 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 because the parent loves the child, and the child is spoiled, spoiled, spoiled. Pure emotion doesn't do it. Emotions have to have a direction. They need to be guided by wisdom in order to make them right. That's why we talk about good emotions and less than good emotions. So, the short answer is, if you answered mind, you're also right. So let me explain. That's the phrase, Moach shalit al halev. The mind shapes the emotions. Let's see if we can put these things together. What is emotion? What is mind? What is consciousness? Let's go for the big word first. That seems to include both of those. When you die, please God, you'll all live to 120 bis 120. 2 seconds after you die, your eye will not see and your ear will not hear. There's been no decomposition. Physiologically, the eye and the ear are still intact, and yet you can't see and you can't hear. Why? So you'll tell me, because you're dead. That explains nothing. What does it mean you're dead? What does death mean? If you're fully intact, why aren't you seeing and hearing? And we must therefore conclude that there's another element. Whether we call that other element energy coursing through our body, whether we want to give it a name like neshama, whatever it is, it must be a flow that flows through the machinery we call eye, the machinery we call ear, and as a consequence of the neshama flowing through those particular pieces of machinery, the human experience is that of sight and hearing. Same with brain. Brain is just machinery. Complex, wondrously so, but still just machinery. When you're dead, you don't think. The neshama flowing through the brain creates the process that we experience as mind or intellect or intelligence, whatever the various words in English that overlap with each other are. So we are a duality. We're made up of these two elements, call it soul and body as such. Now, to discuss emotion and mind in that context. And let's see if we can come up to some working understanding, because we won't be able to handle anger and try to deal with it if we don't understand the nature of mind and emotion. Before I go to the diagram, let me give the definition of consciousness. Consciousness is the collective experience of the neshama flowing through every element of the body. Actually, let's do something fun. Take your two index fingers and allow them to touch. I want you to work out which one is touching which. Okay, now concentrate, because you will find that one seems to be a more active toucher and the other one a more passive touchy, being touched. Work it out. Which one is the more dominant? Don't tell me, because I'm now going to tell you to switch. Make the other one the dominant one, and I assure you, you can. You can do it better with your eyes closed, actually. And then when you've worked it out and done that, switch back. Okay. In the space of 30 seconds, 70% of you have been able to prove to yourself that you have the capacity to direct the flow of consciousness between your two index fingers. And if you can do it between your two index fingers, you can do it with your whole body. With training, with masterfulness, you can. And especially important for health and wellness, which we may touch on a little bit later. The other 30%, got to walk out of the room. What's he talking about? What's wrong with me? Can't do it. That's consciousness. And we can direct that flow. It's very, very important. Let me take you into a Kabbalistic explanation and diagram. A diagram in the world of Kabbalah and Hasidus is not a statement of truth. It's only a pedagogical tool to help us understand concepts. What you're looking there at is the totality of the spiritual and physical cosmos. You have, at the lowest level, a realm called Asiya. The realm of Asiya is characterized by time, space, and consciousness, which are the only three elements that you and I can speak about. There's nothing else outside of those three. Time, space, and consciousness. It's where we live. It's where we operate every day. It's where the existential meaning of life arises. It's us here in this room. That's where we are. You're right there in the pink area. Asiya. The world above it, parallel world, parallel realm, another olam, is called Yetzirah. Yetzirah has no time and no space. Can't even imagine it. And I'm going to tell you, you're there as well. And the world above it, Bria, makes Yetzirah look absolutely concrete. And Atzilus makes Bria look finite. And we're there as well. In the Western teachings, especially in psychology, they have a nice little short word for that called subconscious, which covers everything and means nothing. But that's a good word. We have a much more developed understanding of those realms. It all emanates from a source called Ein Sof, which means without end, infinity, or metaphor for God. Okay, that's the background. Now, through those 4 realms will flow 10 energetic forces, 10 lights, 10 Sefirot. And these Sefirot, as they transcend, refract through those 4 realms and come down to the bottom, they become you and me. 3 of them become mind, Chochmah, Binah, and Da'at, and the other 7 become emotion, Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes, Netzach, Yesod, Malchus. Mind and emotion is the way that Hashem flows through us. And through our finite physical bodies, expresses. All these 10 together are called soul. That's what the neshama is. Neshama is these 10 flowing down into each one of us. So take emotion. We learn about 7 emotions. The truth is each one's made up of each other. So a Hasidic psychologist would have at his or her fingertip a template of no less than 49 emotions in order to assess and understand the nature and character of his or her client. That's very developed. That's very sophisticated, much more so than anything I learned in college and more that I learned in Eastern thinking as well. Here you have it. The rainbow flow through is your neshama, transcending through all those different realms. Now comes a very interesting aspect, and we're getting closer to anger. Hashem created a world dualistically. I said that earlier. What does that mean? We're made up of 2s. Did you notice? 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 feet, 2 hemispheres of the brain. It all comes in 2s, right? 2 lips. The way we perceive reality is dualistic. Up, down, left, right, positive, negative, particle, wave, proton, electron, yin, yang. It all comes in 2s. We even have 2 screens. Everything comes in 2s, okay? Why? Because that is the meaning of life. Big statement coming up. It's our capacity to choose between the 2s of life that provides life's meaning. You can choose to murder, to steal, to hurt on the one hand, or assist, help, confer on the other. And unless you have the choice to do both, life is meaningless. If you didn't have the capacity to murder, who would you be? You'd be a robot, an automaton, an amoeba, just acting on cue, a chemical. So it's ironically the fact that we can degrade ourselves to the nth degree as human beings that provides life's meaning when we choose otherwise. That's very important, because now I'm going to say you can choose to be angry and choose not to be, because we have that dualistic possibility. One more diagram before we get into how to do it, the how-tos. Watch how this diagram evolves. We have a vertical axis that separates before and after AM and PM. We have a horizontal axis that separates mind from emotion. Midot is emotion. You'll soon see the word mind come up there as seichel. We have 4 quadrants, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I'm going to explain to you how we operate. Now, If someone provokes you, what happens first? Usually, what happens first is emotions seem to rise and you sort of blurt things out or behave in a certain way. You act emotionally initially. So number one, midot, emotions take control. When that happens, mind, the Johnny-come-lately, comes running fast behind, but no longer able to lead, is taken prisoner. What do we call it when the emotion takes mind prisoner? Rationalization. They shouldn't have spoken to me like that. I have every right in the world to yell back at them. Who do they think they are? What chutzpah? And that way, you just continue in that way, vague, and nothing happens. It just gets worse and worse. When midot, emotion, takes control and is number one, and seichel comes and becomes number two, you can't win. You will be angry. It's only when you can move from quadrant 2 to quadrant 3, as you see now. What does that mean, quadrant 2 to 3? This is the key. I change my interpretation of the moment. My mind takes over and reframes. I reread the reality of the situation from an empathic, compassionate point of view. When I have done that and transferred across the boundary from 2 to 3, then I can change my emotions. Then mind can be the compass that provides for wise emotions. If we practice this often enough, you can move straight to 3 and 4 and not lose yourself in 1 and 2. I haven't got this on screen, but it's very important to know what habit is. Why some people are habitually angry, or habitually pessimistic, or habitually wake up 3 o'clock in the morning in a state of stress or anxiousness. And there are ways of dealing with that without great difficulty. Habit means that between the two nerve end fibers and the flow of transmitters, neurotransmitters flowing between them, each time you are angry, you embed that highway deeper and deeper. You're making a groove of the mind, so to speak. You know, I'm sure that you have been told that it's very important to vent anger. Get it out of your system, because it'll cause untold damage within. Splatter you on the walls of your house. At least get hold of a broom and hit the bed 100 times and sublimate it. Now, you're all familiar with that. Why? Because 3 generations of psychologists have been telling you that. In the last 5 years, they've been proven wrong. We now know that every act of venting anger is a dress rehearsal for the next occasion. As in the field of neuroplasticity, we're learning the more that you carry out an emotion or behavior, the more likely you will carry it out. You're venting nothing. You're getting rid of nothing. You don't have stuff inside you that you have to get out. People come to me and say, Laibl, I've got stuff. I've got to get it out. I say, really? You've got stuff inside? Interesting. Tell me, what color is it? What size? Where did you say it's located? You don't know? Why? Because there's no stuff. But if you provide someone with the image of anger being stuff within, you create the phantom of stuff, the illusion of stuff, and then it works as if it's there. But if I provide you with a different set of imageries, a different way to be able to picture it, then you will view it in a very different way. There's no stuff. Venting is bad. You have to reframe. So let me teach you how. Wise words, not mine. You can't change reality, but you can change your mind. Another duality. We have a duality called Nefesh Bahamit and Nefesh Elokit, which means our ego self and our higher altruistic self. The ego self seeks to secure us. The altruistic self seeks to confer ourselves on others in order to benefit them. Now, we're not going to go into detail here. This is the kind of things that the 5-week course that Michael's going to be teaching will be speaking about, so I'll save that for him. But it's important to understand that anger is always an expression of the ego self or the nefesh bahamis. So when we talk about the nefesh bahamit or nefesh bahamis, we're talking about you being concerned about self. That's okay to a point. You have to eat, you have to sleep. This is all the function of nefesh bahamit. The problem with the nefesh bahamit is it doesn't know when to stop. Take food. How much food? When do you stop? Why does it become addictive eating? When do you use food as a friend when you don't have a friend? Why do you use it as a security blanket? Why do you want that sugar high that you don't get otherwise with other better formats that create happiness? And what about clothing? You mean you won't wear anything unless it's designer label? Nefesh Bahamit talking. And what about homes? The Nefesh Bahamit doesn't know when to stop. Chandeliers in every room, including the toilet. The Nefesh Bahamit just doesn't know when to stop. That's its problem. It secures you and much more. I want, I want, I want. Forget delayed gratification. That doesn't come into the modeling of the home of today, unfortunately. So the Nefesh Elokit, the higher self, needs to tame the wild horse of the Nefesh Bahamit and says, yeah, you do your stuff, but stop now and reframe and move to higher self-expression, which ultimately leads to true fulfillment and true happiness. Okay, so you've got these two dimensions. And I've spoken a little about anger being a habit and a bit about neuroplasticity. I don't want to go into much of that tonight. I want to take you through a reframing procedure. Look at this diagram, or this picture, this image. As you look at this image, become aware of any feelings that it brings up within you. Don't tell me. As you focus on this image, and what about now? Has there been any subtle change in your feelings? And what about now? This is what we literally call reframing, putting a frame around reality. I can't change the reality. I can't change Pittsburgh, but I can reframe and make myself a more productive individual for prevention, for helping, for assisting. Or I can please myself perversely and remain in states of anger. I wasn't going to, but let me share with you some autobiographical material that impinges on this. My parents were Holocaust survivors. I was born in 1947, straight after the war. My father was 16 when his family was murdered in front of his eyes by a Gestapo officer. He ran away, he managed to escape, and he became a partisan in the forests and survived the duration of the war that way. My mother was very fortunately hidden in the attic of a farmhouse of a non-Jewish person, an attic that was 2.5 feet high. And for 18 hours a day, she had to lie there prone, and only after midnight for 2 hours was she allowed down to both eat and stretch. They survived. I remember when we came to Australia, because I was born in Poland, I was 2 years old. And I remember as a youngster hearing the screams of my parents in their sleep, their dreams. And it left a very marked impression of me, obviously. And when I was a younger person, a young man, I was quite an angry young person, specifically in terms of this, the Holocaust. And I remember my father taking me aside, and he said, if you continue in this manner, you're going to give Hitler a posthumous victory, because all you're going to do is destroy yourself. And that was a real point of departure for me. And that's why I take this subject very, very personally. We know that anger or angry people have a high incidence of illness. Same way as people who suffer stress and anxiousness have a high degree of illness. I'm not talking tonight about stress, worry, and anxiousness, but it falls in the same boat in terms of mastery practices to reframe, to change your interpretation of the moment. It's exactly the same. So what we're saying here is, if you want to overcome anger, you've got to relearn how to read reality. And therein holds the key. I'm going to give you a few steps in order to be able to alleviate the immediate provocation of anger within you. Step number 1, you have to become aware of anger rising within you. That is a half-day seminar. To catch yourself in time. Once it gets past a certain threshold, forget it. So you have to become aware. We all have our physical indicators. You might have an indicator that your fists become clenched, your eyes become squinty, your forehead starts to crease, your stomach starts to cramp. Whatever might be the case, I teach people how to identify the physical indicators that are characteristic for them. That's number 1. Unless you identify the beginning of it, you can't do much about it. So you have to be insightful. You have to master yourself. Step 2. And step 2 is probably the most important step of the 3. You have to ask yourself the following question. What is it that's causing the other person to do or say what they're doing or saying? Again, you have to ask yourself that question. What is it that's causing the other person to say or do what they're saying or doing? And no, you don't need an answer. In fact, you can almost never get an answer. You don't know what's in the mind and heart of the other one to any degree most of the time. Asking the question is the important factor. Why? Note the question. The question is mentally refocusing on the other, the Nefesh Elokit operating. You're moving away from ego, which is the seat of anger, self-centeredness, poor me, into what is it that the other one is going through in order to yell and scream or whatever might be the case. And as I said, the answer is immaterial. It's the asking of the question. You're disengaging momentarily from emotion. That's why mind has to ask the question. Question is a mental activity. You're disengaging from emotion and then coming back to it. You're moving to quadrants 3 and 4 instead of 1 and 2, as we said earlier. And then finally, to make it elongate, don't answer the question, just focus on it with your full inquiring mind. Now, that won't stop you returning to a state of anger 5 minutes later or 10 minutes later. This is a mechanism for the immediate problem at hand. But the truth is, as we mentioned earlier vis-a-vis habit and neuroplasticity, as you apply this more and more and it becomes habitual, the provocation has less and less effect on you, and you're able to move quicker and quicker to quadrants 3 and 4 until they become your new default and become your new habit. So that's a mechanism which can be employed as a beginning point in terms of anger as such. And personally, I think anger is probably the singular most destructive emotion that we can ever emote. In all my counseling practices with couples, the one factor that I have found that destroys most relationships is bursts of anger. If all that is too hard for you, and you don't want to practice, and you don't want to be masterful, that's okay. I'll give you a shortcut. And it's coming up now. I'm going to use two words, emunah and bitachon. Now, you will perhaps recognize the words by way of translation. Emunah is usually translated as faith, and bitachon is usually translated as trust or security. In Israel, the minister for security is called Sar HaBitachon, right? But I'm using them in a psycho-spiritual context. I'm going to give them specialized meaning. Not me. I'm going to quote the Rebbe on this one. The Rebbe explained what emunah and bitachon is in the following manner. Listen carefully. Emunah is the belief that everything that has ever happened to you is for your current good. Bitachon is the belief that the challenge you face now will have a positive outcome. In other words, emunah deals from the past to the present. Whatever's ever happened to you is for your current good. Even if it was painful, God forbid. Bitachon deals from the present to the future. The challenge you face now will have a positive outcome. I assure you that if you adopt these two notions axiomatically in your life, you'll never be angry, you'll never be anxious, you'll never be stressed, and you'll never worry. Can I prove this to you? No. Can you disprove it? No. So we've got a standoff, 50-50 statistical probability either way. So you have to choose to believe. And yes, you do choose beliefs. But I'm going to give you inducement. If you choose to live a life with emunah and bitachon, number one, you'll be much healthier. Number two, your relationships will prosper because people love to be with optimists, hate to be with pessimists and negative people. And three, you'll be happier and more fulfilled. Whereas if you choose the other way, and yes, we do choose our beliefs. And if anyone in this audience says, yeah, but I'm not a believer, that's not true. Everyone here is a believer. I can prove it to you. That I can prove. How did you get here? By car? Don't you know there's a statistical probability you could have died on the roads? It's absolutely correct. It's mathematically proven. But modern person with perfect equanimity believed they will get here intact. You didn't know that, you just believed that. So don't tell me you're not a believer. You are. And there's lots and lots of little beliefs that we adopt in everyday life to function. So I'm asking you to choose a big belief. Don't have to, but there's a good payoff if you do. I've raised this evening a number of different points and issues that are applicable beyond the subject matter as such. But because I think anger and the expression of anger specifically is such a harmful aspect of our society, we need to be able to deal with it effectively. Every one of us in this room, as I said earlier, is duty-bound to go out there and be a leader. The way you comport yourself in company, the way you handle yourself in your friendship groupings, The way you make a contribution to society in your own inimitable way is leadership. And if you don't assert your giftedness, then the world misses out. We're living at a point in history which is poised on the edge of a sword, so to speak. And you can tip the balance. It even says in our writings that for Moshiach to come, one more person has to do one more mitzvah. We don't know who that person is and what that mitzvah is, so we all have to try. And we are all one people. We're Am Echad. We call ourselves by different names and different Jewish sub-denominations, but we're all brothers and sisters. We all have to mutually respect each other to the extent fullest possible. We have to love each other. And love means to know what's going on in the heart and mind of the other person before they tell you. That's how close we have to be. And in so doing, I assure you, with our effort, all of us together will indeed eradicate a lot of the ills, a lot of the harms, and we will make the world a much better place. Thank you.
Thank you, Laibl. If you're more interested, there are many materials Laibl has put out into the world. People use them all over, so he'll be at the back. There are systems for self-mastery. There are systems for meditation. There is music. So please come and say hello. And once again, we hope we'll see you in some of our classes coming up. You can sign up there, yes?
I'm happy to sign any books. And can I just explain to the people, because some people asked me at the beginning, Michael, and I didn't have time to explain what's in those, but you've got materials there dealing with different subject matters, as you see on screen. In nearly all of them, I explain, I lecture, and then I provide meditative exercises in order to change your habitual responses. I'm a big believer in meditation as a mechanism of creating change. The book deals with changing personality, or looking at the Kabbalistic view of the nature of personality, our mind and emotions. And then there are 3 more quite separate items that deal with more contemporary issues, primarily with stress, fear, and the like. One of them is a USB just on 5 mini meditations, and the other 2 are a series of lectures as well as meditations on how to get rid of stress and worry and how to achieve true love and happiness. You also have little slips on your chairs or nearby. If not, there's more at the back for a raffle. In 5 minutes, if you hand in your raffle slip, we're going to conduct the raffle and someone will win one of the products on the table. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to have been with you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Michael.